Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk.
You don't have to look far in Indiana to see the impact Richard Lugar had on the state. Coming up, a look back at the life and legacy of an Indiana icon.
Residents in a Bloomington neighborhood are worried about the chemicals that could be coming from a nearby salvage yard. And we talked to one of a handful of dedicated runners who explains how he has participated in every one of the 42 Indy Mini-Marathons.
And my answer that I came up with years ago was one at a time.
Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, flags in Indiana are flying at half-staff this week in honor of former Indiana Senator Richard Lugar. Lugar died last weekend at the age of 87. As Barbara Brozier reports, many are remembering Lugar not for his career in politics, but for how he treated people.
Dick Lugar's nearly half a century-long political career started in the very city where he was born. He served on the Indianapolis Board of School Commissioners in the 1960s, playing a crucial role in attempting to desegregate local schools and make sure no students went hungry.
He went on the school board and brought the school lunch program to the Indianapolis public school system. Nonsensical that we wouldn't have our students who were poor and needed that nutrition not participating.
His work on the school board prepared Lugar to take on a much larger role, Indianapolis mayor. He served for 2 terms and approached the job in a way no one had before.
He had a very unusual sense to see the opportunity of being mayor in its largest context. You can be mayor and be manager of government, or you can be the leader of a community.
Modern Indiana, an Indiana competing to be a national leader, was born at that moment. That was the moment in '67 when the first inklings of an Indiana restless for greatness began to stir. When the first efforts to shake off satisfaction with the status quo succeeded.
Lugar pushed forward the consolidation of Indianapolis and Marion County government to form what's known as Unigov, and he spoke about the importance of great cities having great universities, a vision that became reality when IUPUI opened its downtown campus in 1969.
Neither Dick himself or any of us here knew how many lives he impacted or how deeply. There is no formula to calculate all those who went into public service because of his inspiration, or the thousands of students who attended IUPUI, built in no small part on his vision, the tens of thousands of Indianapolis school children who benefited from his commitment to school lunch programs.
That list of accomplishments grew exponentially when Lugar was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1976.
Let's clean house in 1976, and let's establish truth and morality in public and private life.
It was the first of what would turn into 6 terms, making Lugar the longest-serving senator in Indiana history. He was known for his sharp intellect and willingness to listen to others, even when he didn't agree with their approach. And many credit much of Lugar's success in Washington to his bipartisan approach when it came to addressing world issues.
He was a Republican, of course, but people like Obama and Nunn and others in Washington had a great deal of respect for him because he didn't vote straight Republican. He would take any issue and study it carefully, came out with what was good judgment.
It's very hard for me to think of a time when I disagreed with him. We worked most often in the Congress in the so-called conference committees between the House and the Senate, where the final judgments are made about legislative policy. And almost every issue that came up, Dick and I would be on the same side.
Lugar's most well-known bipartisan effort is one that would change the world forever. He worked with Democratic Senator Sam Nunn to help former Soviet states dismantle weapons of mass destruction and nuclear arsenals.
With the breakup of the Soviet Union, thousands of nuclear missiles were left behind, some in unreliable hands. Many of the missiles pointed here at home.
On my wall, I have a map of Russia, and I have a chart showing how many warheads have been taken off of missiles, how many missiles destroyed, how many submarines destroyed.
According to the Lugar Center, the Nunn-Lugar program has led to the deactivation of more than 7,500 nuclear warheads.
What's particularly poignant about that now is that he worked his entire career to try to constrain those weapons, to dismantle them. And now our policies are reversed. We are actually building new nuclear weapons. Much of the world is that has the capacity. So we need Dick Lugar's voice more than ever now because we seem to have lost the momentum towards arms control. And that was what he was most involved in.
Despite his leadership on international affairs, Lugar never lost sight of who he was representing or where he came from.
The senator was very well known for being a foreign policy expert, but he loved the state of Indiana. He loved it, and he loved his constituents. He loved being a Hoosier. He was very proud of it. So the fact that it's the state of Indiana right there, I think, speaks volumes about him.
Lugar served in the Senate until 2013, after he lost the Republican primary to Tea Party candidate Richard Murdoch. While the loss devastated Lugar and his supporters, he didn't let it define his legacy.
I think now, in retrospect, people are saying, I think we need him back. And unfortunately, we won't have him back. And the rest of us, it's up to us to carry that torch forward.
He was deeply committed to public service, no question about that, and had all kinds of opportunities, I know, when he left the Senate, to pull down big-time jobs in terms of compensation. He didn't go that path. He kept on the path that he had been on, worked on nuclear disarmament, worked on hunger problems after he left the Senate. So I think he was rooted in the best of the Hoosier values.
And that's what many Hoosiers say they'll remember Lugar for the most. Not his impressive list of political accomplishments, but his character. He had an uncanny ability to talk to anyone and make them feel like someone.
On this back wall case right here, there are 5 volumes that are letters from constituents and businesses and arts organizations, like everybody in Indianapolis. Everybody, they sent him these letters thanking him and telling him how much they appreciated his work, how he had convinced them that politics could be real and not just entertainment and showmanship.
He used to write to the spouses and family members of people who passed away, and he would write 8 or 10 personal notes every day. He did that for 50 years.
Dick Lugar was a very important person who never made others feel less important. A powerful man who took care not to make others feel weak. A leader who worked on issues of global peace and security with presidents and prime ministers, yet who gave his full attention to the student, the healthcare worker, or the farmer right in front of him.
My most effective work really comes in good conversation, in listening carefully, finding places where we agree.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
Former Indiana Governor Evan Bayh says one can really feel the pages of history turning with the recent deaths of Senator Richard Lugar and his father, Birch Bayh. 3 days after Lugar's death, hundreds of Hoosiers, including some of the state's political elite, gathered for a memorial to former Senator Birch Bayh, who passed away in April.
Well, I'm very proud of my father and the legacy that he fashioned with the help of many, many other people. And so as his son, it made me proud, but it also reminded me of a time when people work together to get things done, and perhaps that example can inspire our current generation of leaders to do the same.
But my dad was always there for me to make sure that I knew that he loved me and was proud of me no matter what.
The one thing I take away from my father's life and what he taught me, try and do the right thing. Whether it's as a father, a husband, a member of the community, a public official, do the right thing. That's its own reward. You can sleep well at night, and hopefully you'll be judged favorably by your fellow countrymen.
He was a man of no complaint and no argument. Birch was a man of faith, of belief, yes, but faith as a verb. As our priest, Frank Wade, always reminded us, belief is hearing the music, faith is dancing to it.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. A handful of running veterans will lace up their sneakers to run the Indy Mini-Marathon for the 43rd year in a row. And IU officials say they anticipate that selling beer and wine at football games will mean a drop in alcohol-related incidents. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
$10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Now for headlines, we go over to Barbara Brozier, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. An annual report that looks at food insecurity finds Indiana has a higher rate than the national average at more than 13%. The Map the Meal Gap data provides information for every county in the state. It shows just more than 1/3 of food insecure people make enough money and are ineligible for federal food assistance programs like SNAP. Overall, Indiana's rate is slightly improved. Marion County faces the highest rate of food insecurity overall. A report released this week by the Environmental Working Group claims Duke Energy is holding the country back from making a faster transition to renewable energy. The report claims the utility has lobbied against clean energy policies at the federal level, as well as in Indiana, such as supporting a repeal of higher net metering rates. Duke is one of the largest investor-owned utilities in the country, and it predicts that by 2035, it will still be mostly coal-fired. Governor Eric Holcomb signed a career and technical education bill into law this week at a high school manufacturing center in Seymour, Indiana. At the signing, Holcomb focused on fixing what he calls a leaky pipeline between high school graduates and job opportunities.
This is about connecting people to the opportunity and the skill sets that they need to maximize and to be able to determine their own destiny.
The law gives the governor's workforce cabinet control of $50 million of federal education funds and allows schools to hire career and technical education instructors without teaching licenses. It will also create new initiatives, including a grant for career coaching and a program to keep college graduates in the state that is titled Let Indiana Work for You. The law is set to go into effect on July 1st. A disciplinary case against Attorney General Curtis Hill will move forward after the state Supreme Court appointed a hearing officer. The complaint against Hill comes out of accusations that last year he inappropriately touched 4 women, including a state lawmaker, at a post-legislative session party. Hill's attorney urged the Supreme Court not to appoint a hearing officer in the case, but the court rejected that request by appointing Myra Selby to hear the complaint. Selby, now an attorney in private practice, was the first African-American and first woman to sit on the state Supreme Court. Residents in a Bloomington neighborhood suspect pollution from a nearby salvage yard is washing onto their soil during heavy rains. As Rebecca Thiel reports, the City Council wants the Indiana Department of Environmental Management to test the soil and find out if their concerns are valid.
Sarah Cahillane has lived in the Waterman neighborhood for 3 years. When she found out that JB's Salvage had stormwater runoff violations in the past, she asked the Center for Urban Health at IUPUI to test soil in the neighborhood. Many samples came back with heavy metals above average levels, including chromium, arsenic, nickel, copper, zinc, and lead. Sarah Hamidovich owns VET Environmental Engineering out of Bloomington and has worked with JB's for about 8 years.
There are several salvage yards in the Waterman's neighborhood and adjacent to where we are today that have been used for that land use for decades.
Based on tests she's done at JB's Salvage, Hamidovich suspects the contamination is coming from these older sites. She says chromium, for one, isn't used in newer cars as much anymore. That was more popular in the 1950s through the 1970s, when cars were made of more metal. Cahillane says it doesn't matter to her where it's coming from. She's concerned about the neighborhood's safety.
We know now it exists, so we hope that someone will help us deal with the situation.
Hamidovich says JB's does have a problem with runoff, but it's adding stormwater controls to keep pollution from leaving the site. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
The Monroe County Alcoholic Beverage Board delayed a vote on whether to renew the alcohol permit for Kilroy's on Kirkwood after hearing hours of testimony at a meeting this week. The permit was up for renewal again because the board only granted a 1-year renewal last year amid resident complaints about the bar being a public nuisance. While Kilroy's on Kirkwood had no state excise violations over the past year, the city says there were 81 police calls to the bar.
We just really want them to be a great corporate citizen, and we aren't seeing that at this point based on the data.
An attorney for Kilroy says the number of police calls to the bar isn't reflective of the activity going on there, and he says their training syllabus included a presentation from the Indiana State Excise Police about checking identification and dealing with intoxicated patrons.
Kilroy's on Kirkwood is one of the only bars in the state that participates in a program that confiscates fake IDs and turns them over to Indiana State Excise Police.
The Kirkwood Community Association, which is an alliance of downtown business owners, submitted a letter and spoke in favor of the Kilroy's permit renewal. The board decided to delay its vote on the renewal until its June meeting because one board member had to leave after all of that testimony. Indiana University will allow beer and wine sales to the general public at football games for the first time this fall. The university hired consulting firm Wasserman to study the possibility of wine and beer sales at Memorial Stadium. An analysis found the change resulted in a drop in alcohol-related incidents and safety issues at other campuses.
Schools like Ohio State have reported a 65% drop in alcohol-related incidents inside the stadium at home football games.
Ray says 5 other schools in the Big Ten sell alcohol at sporting events, including Purdue. Now, they originally limited the program to premium seating sections, but expanded it to all of Ross-Ade Stadium in 2017. Officials there say they have noticed a drop in alcohol-related incidents on game days Since implementing the change, a task force made up of university officials at IU will oversee the pilot program here.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see if it affects attendance, too.
Absolutely. Will more people go to the game instead of
Right.
stay and tailgate after?
Barbara, thank you very much. Well, it's a common complaint in Bloomington. Why are gas prices higher here than in other parts of the state? 3 area residents asked that same question. So as part of our City Limits Bloomington project, Tyler Lake goes in search of an answer.
Could you please do an in-depth report on why Bloomington gasoline prices are always higher than elsewhere? That's the question Bloomington resident Bob Tomillo asked. To answer it, though, you have to make sure gas prices in Bloomington actually are higher than in other parts of the state, which can sometimes be tough to establish because gas prices fluctuate constantly depending on the day and the station. A quick look at gas prices on GasBuddy.com this week shows prices in Bloomington hovering close to the average for the state, around $2.86 a gallon. But that's just one snapshot at one moment in time. And an analyst at GasBuddy says you do see marginally more expensive gas in Bloomington.
It's getting close to the point where the average price here in Bloomington tends to be at or a little higher than the regional average or the state average.
And Bloomington's status as a college town creates a situation that adds to the belief that gas prices are higher here. College towns have their own gas price rhythms. Spring break is a time Bloomington could see price hikes ahead of students leaving town. But when an agricultural economist looks at the data, he doesn't see Bloomington as a major outlier compared to prices in the state. He says most folks think they're overpaying for gas, but that's not always the case.
And everybody thinks they're higher in their region than they are anywhere else. And it's not true.
But gas prices are often driven by consumers based on what they're willing to pay. McTegg says costs for operators can vary, and they make the final call. He says the price of gas for gas stations this week was around $2.60 a gallon. So the markup from there is about the owner's expenses and what they think consumers will pay. And real estate costs play into the math operators must do to set pump prices. Property is in higher demand in Bloomington and more expensive. That could translate to higher markups for owners to be able to recoup their expenses and still turn a profit. McTegg says the relative consistency of prices across Bloomington indicates a healthy market.
We may be in a bit of a sweet spot. People are happy with the price, happy with the level of competition, and no one's really beating each other up in order to try to do out another competitor.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Tyler Lake.
And we want to hear your questions about the changing face of Bloomington. You can join the conversation by going to WTIU.org/citylimits to ask your questions about the past, present, and future of the city of Bloomington. An Indianapolis man is gearing up for his 43rd straight Indy Mini-Marathon. He's one of a half dozen surviving runners who has done every race since its inception. But as Adam Pinsker reports, he keeps making it across the finish line by simply taking it one day and one stride at a time.
Yeah, I mean, these were mid-70s indoor track shoes.
He has the shoes and the physique to prove it. Mike Vollmer's run in all 42 mini-marathons, and he's about to make it 43.
The second-year shirt has a big track right on the front.
As he pounds the pavement training for the big 13.1-mile race, a lot of people have been asking him,
or how have you done 42 mini-marathons? And my answer that I came up with years ago was one at a time.
Vollmer's living room is a treasure trove of keepsakes from mini-marathons of the past. Vollmer says it was his position on the Indianapolis City County Council that motivated him to run in his very first mini.
Like any politician wanting to get some notoriety, I thought, well, if they're going to have this race through the 17th Council District, I should be involved in it.
Vollmer says he thought about quitting after the first couple years because the Mini used to be held on the same weekend as the Indy 500, and the temperature in late May can get really hot. There are also some other near misses due to nagging injuries.
One was an Achilles one year that bothered me, and another was a back issue.
But Vollmer's memorable and most emotional marathon was the last race his dad got to watch. Weakened by cancer, he insisted on seeing his son run in person.
He had my mom wheel him down in a wheelchair, take him down 2 blocks, and he was in his wheelchair wanting to see me go by, which was, and I stopped for a brief time.
Vollmer is one of the 6 people left who have run in all 42 mini-marathons, a feat that stuns Indy 500 Festival CEO Bob Bryant.
Anybody who would do anything for 42 straight years, and soon to be 43, that's on the same Saturday in May, just how do you even orchestrate your life around 43 straight years that you're available that same Saturday in May every year?
But Vollmer isn't sure if he'll be able to outlast the other 5 fellow runners he shares his streak with.
If I would have to bet my own money, I'd say probably no.
So Saturday could be the final lap on an incredible 4-decade run, but Vollmer still hopes he won't have to hang up his running shoes any day soon. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
The running tradition is something Vollmer will share this year with more than 35,000 other runners. Now, since the race started, it has swelled to one of the largest half marathons in the country. And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.